Returning to Canada's trade war with the U.S. now, the Port of Churchill could soon be a very strategic asset.
President Trump's trade war is affecting America's ports. Container shipment bookings are down nearly 50% from a year ago.
Major drops in cargo at U.S. ports due to tariffs.
The port can help Canadian products reach new markets in a fraction of the time. The port has seen a spike in interest with the threat of tariffs looming.
The Port of Los Angeles is the busiest in the Western Hemisphere, but now it's preparing for a dramatic slowdown.
Imagine two old friends suddenly at odds, not over money or land, but something even more vital, water. Down in the U.S., the South is bone dry, gripped by a brutal drought that's choking farms and towns. Donald Trump's got his eyes locked on Canada's rivers and lakes, calling them America's lifeline, a way to save states like California and Arizona from drying up. His voice booms from Washington, louder every week, demanding access to Canada's water like it's a deal waiting to be closed. But in Ottawa, they're not budging. Prime Minister Mark Carney, a guy who's more at home with balance sheets than battle lines, finds himself in the fight of his life. He's not just defending water, he's guarding Canada's very soul. This isn't about trade spats over steel or cars anymore. It's a clash that could redraw the power map of North America. And everyone's wondering, how far will this go before it spirals into something uglier? At the heart of it all is the Columbia River, a mighty 2,000-kilometer flow that starts in British Columbia and crosses into the U.S. Trump's zeroed in on it, hitting pause on talks to update a 1961 treaty that kept both sides happy for decades, managing floods and hydropower. With one fiery speech, he turned a shared resource into a bargaining chip, saying Canada's rivers are fair game for America's survival. Canada's response? Pure shock, then fury. Indigenous communities, environmentalists, and over 80 groups banded together, sounding the alarm. Giving up water means giving up sovereignty. Carney, not known for grand speeches, stepped up with a fire most didn't know he had. Canada's rivers aren't for sale, he said, his words sharp and final. They're not commodities for anyone. That was it, a line in the sand. In hours, quiet diplomatic talks exploded into a global showdown, with eyes from London to Tokyo watching nervously. For the U.S., it's a bitter pill. States like Nevada and California were banking on Canadian water to save their crops and ease the drought's grip. Now, with Canada standing firm, they're left empty-handed, and the tension's only climbing. So here we are, holding our breath, wondering what happens when the fight for water turns into something none of us can control. In California's Central Valley, the heart of America's fruit and veggie farms, farmers got ready for water that was promised but never arrived. Empty canals and broken dreams replaced those hopes, hitting hard in a region that grows nearly 40% of the nation's vegetables and 2/3 of its fruits and nuts. Crops withered, harvests tanked, and grocery prices climbed. Families, already pinched by inflation, felt the sting every time they bought lettuce or almonds. The shortages even rattled global markets, threatening everything from tomatoes to tech. The trouble didn't stop with farms. In Arizona, massive semiconductor plants, which need millions of gallons of water each week, were counting on that same promise. So were factories and energy plants across the Midwest and Pacific Northwest. When Canada said no to sharing its water, those plans fell apart. Production lines slowed, workers faced layoffs, and industries like steel and autos in places like Michigan and Ohio hit pause. The big talk of a manufacturing boom started to feel like a mirage. Energy was another casualty. In the Pacific Northwest, hydroelectric plants, already struggling with low reservoirs, had banked on Canadian water to keep going. Instead, utilities turned to coal and gas, driving up bills and undoing years of clean energy progress. It all stemmed from a bold Washington plan that didn't deliver. Trump had sold Canadian water as the key to American strength, but Canada's refusal showed the limits of that vision. Worse, his talk of ditching the Great Lakes Water Agreement spooked cities like Chicago and Detroit, where millions rely on those lakes for clean drinking water. What started as a promise of independence left a lot of folks feeling stranded. Trust in international deals suddenly felt fragile, and the thought of losing freshwater protections had people on edge. Markets moved fast. Investors saw agriculture and manufacturing as risky, and farm stocks took a hit. Soon, tech and energy companies, thirsty for water, were in the spotlight too. Before long, everyday folks were paying more for food, electricity, and electronics. It all started when Canada said no to sharing its water. That choice sent shockwaves through the U.S. economy. In Ottawa, Prime Minister Carney stood firm, choosing Canada's independence over short-term wins, even with the U.S. pushing back. For years, America assumed Canada's resources were a sure thing, a backup for tough times. That myth broke apart, showing just how much the U.S. relied on its neighbor. This wasn't just a spat over rivers. It proved water is now the world's most vital resource. Oil once drove global power struggles. Today, it's water. Canada's massive reserves used to reassure the U.S., a quiet promise of help during droughts. That comfort's gone, and the effects reach far beyond North America. From battles over the Euphrates in the Middle East to disputes over the Mekong in Asia, water is reshaping geopolitics. Canada's move made it a global heavyweight, guarding one of the planet's most precious assets. Look at the Columbia River Treaty from 1961, a model of U.S.-Canada cooperation, balancing flood protection and hydropower profits. It worked like a charm for decades. But this moment flipped the script, showing Canada's new role as a key player in the global resource game. Trump's suspension of the treaty renewal sent a clear warning. Even the most established agreements could collapse under pressure. Around the world, governments began questioning America's reliability. For Canada, the moment proved that water itself could be wielded as national power. The Great Lakes underscored the stakes. They sustain 40 million people, drive hundreds of billions in trade, and link North America to global markets. Trump's suggestion of loosening protections didn't just rattle Canada. It signaled to investors that even the continent's most dependable freshwater system could be politicized. Confidence cracked, and capital began to drift elsewhere. Others were quick to notice. In Beijing, companies quietly explored investments in Canada's water sector, seeing it not as a commodity, but as the lifeblood of industry and cities, today's version of oil. In Brussels, policymakers facing relentless droughts started to view Canada as a potential lifeline. Southern Europe's parched farmlands now factor Canadian water into their survival strategies. History offers a reminder. In the 1970s, oil was never expected to be weaponized until OPEC shattered that illusion overnight. Water now carries the same disruptive power. Prime Minister Mark Carney's refusal wasn't just about sovereignty. It was a declaration that Canada controls a resource capable of reshaping global alignments. That message is echoing far beyond Washington. In Asia, drought-stricken nations are already negotiating long-term deals for Canadian agricultural exports. Each one chips away at U.S. leverage while elevating Canada's role. By 2030, vast stretches of the American West may face unrelenting drought. Without Canadian cooperation, the U.S. will be forced inward, relying on costly technologies and conservation. The tools exist, but can they be built fast enough and at a price the nation is willing to pay? All right, that's it for today. Thanks for hanging out with me. If you had a good time, hit that like button, and if you're new here, consider subscribing so you don't miss what's coming next. Take care of yourself, and I'll catch you in the next one.